I wonder what life was like in Jericho in the weeks and months following that incident you just heard in the gospel. Like people who didn't know anything about it. You know, they're sitting in their house, having a nice little time at home, and they look out the window and they see Zacchaeus coming down their sidewalk. And they probably would have said to the kids, "Go hide. Okay, everybody, quiet, quiet. The tax collector's here, and we don't want him to know we're home." So they would all have to be really quiet in the house. Luckily, they didn't have TVs or stereos to turn off. They would just have quiet the kids. Shh, be quiet. And then the knocking on the door, and they're kind of saying, "Oh, I hope he goes away, because we've already paid our taxes, and he always wants so much, and we can't afford anymore. Oh, I hope he goes away." Finally, the knocking stops. They look out the window, and they see Zacchaeus walking away down the sidewalk. Then they open the door, and an envelope falls down. And they think, "Oh, no, he left a bill for us. This must be how much taxes we owe." And they open up the envelope, and it's filled with cash. And they think, "What?" And then a little note included saying, "Well, I figured I have cheated you out of $500 over the last few years that I have records for. I'm repaying everybody fourfold. So here's 2,000. They're like, "Woo! Look at that. We hit the jackpot. Zacchaeus left us $2,000 in the door. How could that happen?" And how many other incidents were there like that? Because he says to Jesus, "I am going to pay everybody I cheated fourfold." And so he had to go back through all his records to see who he had actually cheated. And that was a common thing that tax collectors did, was to cheat. You probably are familiar with a little bit of that system that Rome had set up. So the tax collector paid everybody's taxes at the beginning of the season. Rome wanted their money up front. So the tax collectors paid it. And then they figured out how much everybody owed, and they collected it through the rest of the year. And added a little bit more on, because they could. That was part of the deal with Rome, that they could make a profit as well. So it's how much of a profit that the tax collector gets to make is where the cheating came in. But fourfold. And he was a wealthy man. He had done very well as a tax collector, not only a tax collector, but the chief tax collector for Jericho, which was a prosperous community. There's all kinds of orchards there, huge fig orchards near Jericho. It's down in the Rift Valley there, close to the Dead Sea. So it was wealthy. He made a lot of money. He was probably one of the richest guys in town. And he says he's going to give half of all he has away to the poor. Half. The poor people are probably like, "What is going on? He's put me up in a house. I got a lot of food. I got new clothes. Everything is lovely." Because Zacchaeus changed. I bet they told stories for the longest time about that. I often wondered, too, what the conversation was like at his house. Because they go from him climbing down the tree and having that brief conversation with Jesus over to his house to eat. He probably had one of the biggest houses in town. I don't know if Jesus was impressed when he came in, made comments about the Roman art that was around, or what they ate, or what they talked about. And did Zacchaeus feed all the disciples? Did he invite in others of his friends so that they too could have this experience? Such a shocking change. I'm not sure if we have anything comparable. Sometimes in movies, I think, well, maybe years ago, like when there was like a drug lord, today maybe still true in Mexico and places, where a drug lord or a criminal boss ran a town and expected money from everybody or work from everybody. And everybody in town was afraid of that person because of what they might do to you. So that kind of scene, because the people would have been fearful of Zacchaeus. Nobody probably just invited him over for dinner. Why don't we have Zacchaeus over? He's a good guy. No. Nobody did that unless they were trying to get their way, work their way up the system. So, afterwards, what was it like? Did people start inviting him over? Clearly we know this, that Luke, when he was doing research, investigating Jesus' life, ran across either Zacchaeus himself or plenty of people who could tell the story. It only appears in Luke's gospel. So somebody, Zacchaeus, told it. And it would have been humbling for Zacchaeus if he told Luke, oh, I'm so short. I couldn't see, so I ran up the tree and was in the tree just because I wanted to see the guy. And then here was the amazing thing. I'm looking at him, but he looks up at me, and you know what? He knew my name. He knew my name. And he said, Zacchaeus, come down. Hurry down. I'm staying at your house tonight. If we were reading this whole story in Luke's gospel, you would realize that this is his last night anywhere before he enters Jerusalem. He leaves Zacchaeus' house and he walks with his disciples along that rough path through the wilderness between Jericho and Jerusalem, and then he enters Jerusalem and begins his final days. Zacchaeus' house was probably his last real peaceful meal. Telling stories, teaching Zacchaeus. But Zacchaeus was never, ever again the same. And probably the whole city of Jericho was never, ever again the same. It's a great example to us of what a conversion of heart looks like. And why I think it's a great example is because Zacchaeus, as he's making these promises to Jesus, is full of joy. He's eager. Sometimes I think when we think we have to convert to Jesus, it's like, oh, I'm going to have to give up something I really like. It's going to be terrible. I'm going to be so depressed following Jesus. But no. There's joy there. joy in even giving away half of what he had. That's what real conversion looks like, because you begin to realize what really matters and what doesn't. And what Jesus brings him is life.